morning I present the other presentation about a high selective RET inhibitor. I think this is a novel drug come from Sichuan Kelun Biotech company. It is a company from China. So I think in this morning I present the phase 1 data about this novel drug. The name of the drug is A400. This drug is a next generation selective RET inhibitor. Why we called it next generation? Because from the structure, this drug is highly selective for RET fusion or RET mutation compared to first generation RET inhibitor. For example, this drug will focus on the RET fusion or RET mutation, than other kinases like VEGFR or JAK1, JAK2. So this structure will lead to less toxicity. And the second point is this drug can overcome the resistance to the first generation TKI, because just from the both preclinical and clinical data, we can see this drug can cover the resistant mutation. So in our clinical trial, we also enrolled some patients who have received prior selective RET TKI, and after enroll in our clinical trial, after receive the A400, this novel drug, most of the patients also achieved partial response. So we can see from these two aspects, we can call the novel drug A400 as next generation high selective RET inhibitors. This is a phase 1 study. This is a typical dose escalation and dose expansion study. In this study, we enrolled both the RET fusion or RET mutation non-small cell lung cancer or medullary thyroid cancer and some other alteration solid tumors. And in this phase 1 trial, we started the dose level from 10 milligram and increased to 20, 40, 60, 90, and up to 120 milligram. And we also do the dose expansion at 60 and 90 milligram cohort. From this phase 1 trial, we analyze the safety and the efficacy and the PK data. This is the study design. In this study, first of all, we found the new next generation RET TKI, A400, has quite different toxicity profile compared with the first generation RET TKI. Because as we know, the first generation RET TKI has more hematological toxicity or cardiovascular toxicity. But in the next generation RET TKI in our study, we didn't have such high hematological toxicity and cardiovascular toxicity. In our clinical trial, we found we have the most common toxicity liver dysfunction, constipation, and such as kidney dysfunction, but not such high hypertension or prolonged QTc that found in first generation TKI. This is a toxicity profile. And from the efficacy, we can see across different tumor types, the overall response rate is more than 60%, and the disease control rate is more than 90%. This efficacy is very exciting. And if we focus on the RET fusion positive non-small cell lung cancer patients, in treatment naive group, the overall response rate is more than 80%, a very high response rate. And the disease control rate is also more than 90%. And in the pre-treated non-small cell lung cancer patients, the overall response is nearly 70%. And the disease control rate is also more than 90%. I think in both groups, the efficacy is both very impressive. And finally, I think in some patients who have received previous first generation RET TKI, the response rate is also very high. In 7 patients who received first generation TKI, 5 patients achieved partial response. And also, I think another good result is in patients with brain metastasis. In 6 patients with brain metastasis, 5 patients achieved partial response, and 3 patients, the intracranial lesion completely disappeared. So this is very expensive. Yeah, I think so far in our clinical practice, we have the first generation RET TKI approved both in America and in China. But I think so far we need more have better efficacy and more tolerability, and we need next generation TKI to overcome the resistance to first RET TKI. So I think our result, maybe in the future, we can change the now the status so far. So so far we can see the pivotal study, phase 2 trial, and the other expansion cohort in other solid tumors, just ongoing both in China and in America and Europe. I think maybe in the future the result of such kind of clinical trial will change the clinical criteria of now.